Hello coaches, welcome back to another Modern Soccer Coach interview. Today we are joined by Jamie Hamilton talking about Fernando Diniz. What a great topic this is. If you want to read more about Jamie's work, please check it out on the links below. I highly recommend it. And when you're in the links, please like and subscribe. Also, thank you so much for your support. Today we're going to talk about Diniz's system at Fluminense. Positionalism versus relationism. Not necessarily structure versus no structure. It's more systems versus different levels of freedom within those systems. Brilliant topic. If you love football tactics and you're open-minded, you will love this here. If you do love it, please give it a like and please make sure you subscribe. Here's Jamie. Enjoy. Jamie, thanks so much for joining me, the Modern Soccer Coach podcast. Excited to have you on again. Very, very excited.
No, pleasure to be back with you, Gary. Been looking forward to this. It's been a while since we spoke last time, so yeah, it's something I'm looking forward to. Thanks for having me.
No, the last time we spoke was about De Zerbi before he arrived in Brighton, and they obviously got, because he was trendy and cool, and you give a lot of insight into what he was about, and then predicted that it would transfer to the Premier League, and lo and behold, it has transferred to the Premier League. What have you made of him?
Well, pretty much what I thought would happen, really. It's like he's got such an incredible system and obviously such an incredible ability to implement that system relatively quickly. I was a little bit surprised how quickly he got it going, which I suppose is just testament to his ability to communicate, to adapt. But yeah, I mean, and I wasn't certainly the only one who saw in this system this innovation that if you put it into a context where there isn't anything like that, then it's probably going to be effective because it's an innovative idea. I think it's interesting now that we start to see the narratives about, oh yeah, maybe he needs to change, like he needs to find a plan B because teamers are working him out. And that's kind of working out his innovation, which is super interesting. But De Zerbi seems like a pretty smart guy. I think he's probably got a few more tricks up his sleeve.
All right, today's topic, which we're going to get into, is this discussion of positionalism versus relationism and Diniz and Brazil and Fluminense and his style and all that there. So let's start where the definitions, just a little post of a tweet that you basically defined. Yeah. Positionism, you said, where all possible relations are a function of positions. Relationism, where all possible positions are a function of relations. So can you give us a little bit of a definition and an oversight of what that is?
Yeah, so these tweets I sometimes tweet things out just as I'm thinking about them and developing like ideas with other people, right, as well, and chatting to other people who are interested in this kind of stuff, and like proposing ideas, proposing the frameworks, these kinds of things. And yeah, it seemed to be pretty well. The thing is, this positional play is a thing, right? It's been a thing, I think, for a recognized concept for a fairly long time. So I'm not really creating that, and I'm calling it positionism, okay, which is something different from positional play. But the principles of this style of play, I think, are fairly well documented and have been written about a lot in the last 10 years. Or 10, 15 years, especially with the rise of Guardiola and his incredible success. And then, of course, all the influence that he's had. JDP, right? Juego de posición, positional play. These concepts and ideas have been really analyzed a lot online. And then that spreads into reality as well. So then it's interesting to think what that is, right? And the clue's in the name, right? It's positional play. And that means that where the players are standing, positioned on the pitch, the structures that they're taking place, that they're arranged in by the coach, these structures are affording the interactions that happen within that team. It's and you can see it from like De Zerbi or Guardiola or whoever. It's the starting structure that then affords the interactions that are going to take place. So your first point of call, if you like, the primary aspect here is the position of the players, and then from that you can play your up back throughs, you can do your third mans, you can do all these decisions, and the players are still making, but it's within this structured context. So then it's interesting to think, okay, well, if that's the case, then what could an alternative be? Well, what if you don't start with position? What if you don't start with a static setup, which actually, if you watch De Zerbi, is a very instructive example of a static starting point, because, and we saw it also in the game yesterday, Manchester City playing against Arsenal as well. The teams will stand when the goalkeeper or the centre back has the ball. They will now stand almost still, like with their foot on the ball, and the players adopt their positions, and oftentimes it is static. So, and that's fine. That's one way to do it. But what if that wasn't the case, and that you started with movement, right? And there wasn't this defined structure that was affording the players decisions, actions, and the interactions that they're making. What if those were fluid and they were actually up to the player in the moment to make decisions not influenced by this organizational structure, but by the emergent structure of the moment, for them to interpret what was happening in real time and then act accordingly with principles, right? Short passing, keep possession, long, but whatever you want. But the idea being that the decisions, actions, interactions are not primarily afforded and governed by an organized structural system. It's actually emergent and in real time, if you like. So that's why I would say that going back to that tweet, if you start with position, then that is the primary aspect. But what if where you are on the pitch and where you move is actually just a function of the relations of that moment, of the connections of that moment between you, your teammates, the ball, all these things, not the set down plan of the coach at the start. So that's how I would try to describe that initial tweet, I think.
Yeah, you're saying there that you've not invented positional play, but I do think that whether you realize it or not, you're the first one that I've encountered who has openly kind of questioned the limitations of it or the effects of it. It comes across as a cool, attack-minded, total football way of playing the game, but your writing and your voice over, well, let's actually challenge this a little bit. That's actually what got me more engaged into reading about, because I never looked at it from that lens. And then once you start kind of moving from I suppose a position of naivety to more cynicism about it, I think that's when it opens your eyes. My question would be, like, this machine that you associated with, and I found this really, really interesting. You're writing the machine, the prioritization of standardization, automation, repetition, flattening out of human creativity through mechanized processes designed to benefit and serve a non-human entity. You're coming across as someone who, be careful, isn't worshipping the Guardiola Cruyff style of football. How do you balance between having an appreciation of it and, I guess, looking at it in a more objective lens?
Yeah, and first thing to say is that, and I've said it before on in podcasts I've written about it, I coached positional play for a good period of time, right? I'm very interested in positional play, and I was, let's say, really attached to positional play, and I believed at that point that it was the best way to facilitate possession controlling football. And yeah, that's all fine. And I'm not trying to I'm not trying to eradicate positional play, right? But in that first article, I think that's the Fernando Diniz versus the Man Machine you're quoting from, I think. And that was the first time I wrote about it. So there's a bit of artistic license, right, in the framing of it. Although we can get into some of the things that I'm writing about there, because we can get into the details of what I'm actually talking about. But I think at that point, I thought it was very interesting, like you say, to posit or propose this alternative, right? To say, hey, this isn't the only game in positional play, isn't the only game in town. If you want to control the ball, make a possession-based style, and be effective at football. And it's also important to say at this point, while you say I came up with these things, they're influenced by Brazilian writers and Brazilian tactical theory that I don't really exactly remember how I came into contact with. I think it was after I started maybe tweeting. Maybe it was even after that first article. I don't remember exactly. But there are people in the online who are and throughout history who have documented an alternative style of football. The name relationism is something I gave to it, and I expanded it and maybe added things here and there. But the essence of it is inspired by these Brazilian writers. So it's very important that I think that's noted. It comes down to taste, I suppose, because I'm looking at it more. I've always been looking at football from this perspective of how it makes me feel, right? When I'm watching it, when I'm coaching it, when I'm involved in it, what is the feeling I get? Like when you hear a song or watch a film or eat food or meet a person, you get a feeling that it's not necessarily something that you've worked out or planned or anything like this. And the feeling I get when I watch what we might now call relational football or jogo funcional in Brazil, or Deniz's football that's now other teams are adopting, is very different to the feeling I got when I was watching positional play. It was, I don't know, it's a feeling of excitement. It's a feeling of there's something unpredictable about it. There's a feeling of joy when you see certain moves come off. A feeling of surprise and all these things. So that's what's kind of drawing me into it. So I can watch positional football and still enjoy aspects of it. The organizing, there's amazing technique, amazing ideas. We've talked about De Zerbi already, the innovations, and that's all fine. But I think it's important for me anyway, from my perspective. That's one strain of football thought, and that's nice. If you're into that, and that's fantastic, and coach that, no problem. But it's not the only strain of football thought. There are different ones, and I think it is a much more interesting place, the football landscape, the coaching world, the tactical world, when we think of it as there being different lines of thought, lines of inquiry. And while we do that, then we can actually contrast things, and we can look at them and say, well, hey, maybe there's a failing on this side that is compensated by this other idea. And at the same time, the other way, maybe there's a failing on this side that's compensated by this idea. And by contrasting them, I think we get a very interesting situation, right, where we can start to mix, we can start to take influence. If I'm a musician and I only listen to one other musician, I will just sound like them. But if I take my influences from all over the place, from jazz, from blues, from soul, from techno, from rock and roll, from metal, then hey, maybe I'm going to come up with something really interesting because I'm drawing from a diverse range of perspectives. And I think that hopefully what this idea of bringing into attention an alternative possession football framework, we can then start to have this diversity of approach. So when I'm thinking about balancing them, I'm trying to think like that, while I have no problem in saying at this point I have a preference for what you might call relational football. And that's like I have a preference for certain artists or certain foods. Like that's me, right? I just feel the way I feel. Maybe that'll change. I'm not saying I'll be like that for the rest of my life, but at this moment, that's what the football I'm drawn to, the football I'm interested in. But it's not to say, and I can make arguments why I prefer it, right? But it's not to say that I want everyone to stop doing anything else. Of course not. That would be falling into the trap that I'm actually criticizing. So.
Yeah, no, this is great. And just to be clear, there'll be people listening who are coming across your work for the first time, and right. It's not a bashing because it's 2023 and social media is what it is. It's not that you're going against Man City or going against Barca or Pep. And your work, I think it was the Diniz versus Man Machine article where you referenced the '82 World Cup game, and I love football history, and that I never actually thought that was a turning point of creativity and flair versus not a positional play system, but a structured system. Yeah. Talk about that there moment where you think that was a little bit of a turning point.
Well, I think I actually took that from Jonathan Wilson's book, Inverting the Pyramid. I think I referenced that with a quote from Jonathan Wilson saying something like, "This is the day the system died," or something like that, or the system's won over something spontaneous. Yeah. I can't remember the exact quote, but that's from Jonathan Wilson, who writes these tactical histories and things like that. And I suppose it is interesting to look at those other authors and look at the the timelines of tactical history that are produced by people, because there's also alternative timelines of tactical history. Remember, Jonathan Wilson's is only one, right? And many from South America would actually criticize Jonathan Wilson's interpretation and call it Anglocentric and this kind of thing, because it doesn't take into account the things they think are important, which is all fine. Again, we have this diversity of interpretation, which I think is interesting. But Wilson's point there, I think, probably serves, rings relatively true in the sense that we had this 82 team, right, of Tele Santana, and I actually recently watched like every Brazil possession of 1982 World Cup, right, every time they attacked, and some of the sequences are just unbelievable. I was born in 1982, right, so I don't remember watching it like when I was a kid. Obviously, I wasn't born, but watching it now, the movement, the flow, the principles they had, I love to watch it. It's fantastic. So, and that team was obviously revered around the world. It was the first time a lot of, I suppose, a lot of football fans in Europe had seen this level of, and it was built around the Flamengo team of that era as well. You had Zico and Junior, and Socrates, all these incredible players who had such incredible understanding between themselves and played with these principles of always moving to the future point, right? They called it they talk about this idea, the ponto futuro, right? The future point where the ball would always arrive and somewhere in the future, the player would always arrive somewhere in the future. So they're always moving after they pass. It's incredible to watch. And it's the opposite of this, of a positional system, right? Where they stand in the framework and they pass, they transfer the ball around from position to position, seeking the opening, and then they go and attack. And this one, they're just moving every time they play. There's just constant movement. And so when you contrast these two ideas of the structure, like you say, maybe something more like a regimented Italian system, and this flamboyant, fluid Brazilian idea of relational understandings, and then you get this almost tragedy, right, from this Brazilian perspective, that the system defeats it, and Rossi scores the hat trick, right, and almost counter-attack goals. There's a couple of mistakes. They give the ball away at the back. And it's like, I don't think anyone really argues that Brazil were a better football team. Okay, we can get into what that means, but there is something about these events, right? These kind of that have ripples, and that these failures against European opposition from the Brazilian team playing that system really plays on the Brazilian psyche in this sense. And there's this idea of inferiority to European systems keeps creeping in. And over time, it seems as though, according to Brazilian writers and commentators, that this has really gone quite deep into the psyche of the football thinking, and that there is a feeling among many people that they must move to Europeanization in order to compete at the highest level, which is probably why you see coaches like Tite at the last World Cup playing a pretty positional system. And there's been other iterations of it. So it's very interesting, again, from that cultural perspective, to listen to these Brazilian interpretations of the people saying this isn't, we were playing our version, our expression of football, which was so important to Brazil, which really, they were, not a wealthy country with huge resources compared to European teams throughout the years, and they won these World Cups in like flamboyant style. Like, what was going on? Why is this country from South America so good? And for them, there are reasons why that is the case, and a lot of it to do with this authentic expression of cultural identity being played out in their football. As much as art, music, literature, food is important to other places, football in Brazil has this incredible feeling attached to it. So, yeah, when it's defeated in these big moments, in these global matches, that has an impact. It affects the cultural narrative. So when Jonathan Wilson points to something like that, I can see why it can be seen as an event. Not the only event. It could be seen as an event that's caused that thinking to come about.
Yeah, it's also gone, just when I was thinking, when you're talking there about 94 World Cup had a big impact on me. I fell in love with Brazil through Pele videos and Brazil 70 and 86. But 94 was the first team that I felt connected to because of the era. And it was set up as a more of a European type system. I remember 4-4-2. I think Romario, Bebeto, Zinho, Mazinho. But what's interesting that is a few years later, when I started coaching, I went to a presentation, a conference that Carlos Alberto Pereira was presented in, and that team had such an impact on me as a kid. I wasn't into tactically minded, Then I went to his presentation as a coach. Oh, Jamie, he must have done an hour and a half, and he had one of the slides, and he took still pictures from every game of the 2002 World Cup, and he was up in I think he just went to games and took his camera, and it might have been the most boring thing I've ever sat in my life. And I was thinking, "Jeez, you're Brazilian! Like, I thought you played a different type of football."
Yeah, well, that team wasn't massively revered in Brazil, right? Even though they won, and even though the 4-4-2, we can say it's like a European system. Although the narrow 4-4-2 is quite a system that you will see in Brazilian football, with the two sixes, two attacking midfielders, and two strikers. You got this kind of narrow 4-2-2-2 almost. You'll see this kind of, because it allows them to get together. We can get to this. It allows them sort of close proximity, right? Which is something we can get to. Although, Pereira's team was it Dunga, Mauro Silva sitting in the middle. Of course, you had Romário, who's like incredible. Like, I remember, I loved this team as well. I loved the baby rocking celebrations against Holland, all these kinds of things. These are the images I had when I was a kid. But it wasn't the most flamboyant team, right? You had Rai, who was the captain, I think, but was injured prior to the tournament. So it was a team that didn't really have maybe that iconic playmaker. I certainly had Romário kind of filled that role, but not massively revered in terms of this kind of Brazilian expression. So perhaps another example of kind of Europeanization of play there.
Brilliant. All right, not to move away. Diniz, you mentioned about like the feeling that you had when you saw him, the type of football. When was that? And can you remember like what it was initially that jumped out at you?
Yeah, I've tried to think. A few people have asked me this, and I honestly can't remember the first moment. But what I do remember is, and it was probably around the time I was speaking to you last, Gary, about De Zerbi, right? I was very into this De Zerbi's, and I think I was into De Zerbi because it was different. There was something new about this system, and one of the things I think that struck me about it was the proximity of the players, right? The players would actually get very close together in De Zerbi's system, which would be different from some of the JDP positional play systems you see with the very wide attackers, everyone spread out across the pitch. You see like Luis Enrique, for example, now with the Spanish national team and now Paris Saint-Germain, plays a very wide, kind of open, classical positional play game. De Zerbi, much closer. And I think that's really interesting, because then you get different kinds of affordances. You start to get these relational affordances between players who have these understandings. So I think it was probably something to do with that. And maybe I saw a clip or someone said, "Hey, have you checked out this team?" because they were so close together. I don't remember exactly how, but I remember seeing these videos of these players so close together, 7, 8 guys in one narrow zone of the pitch and making combinations. And I just thought, what the hell is this? Like in 2022, whatever year it was, I forget what year we're in now, right? 2022. Like, what football is this? Like, this isn't taught anywhere. Like, when you go through all the coaching stuff online and go through your UEFA courses and coaching real life, everything, right? You don't see this. Like, you'd be laughed out of town if you set your team up like that on your UEFA license. Do you know what I mean? It's like, okay, but then there's this guy doing it, and it's okay. Well, who is this guy? And then I started watching all these Fluminense games, learning a little bit about Diniz. I mean, as much as one can from a distance, and it became clear that this guy is very interesting because he's playing this fairly radical style of football, which, and according to him, is linked to this idea of a classical Brazilian style, but updated for the modern game, right? And maybe I think he's been trying to get this system in a way that can work at the highest level for almost all his career. And he's been seen in Brazil as this kind of mad guy who's always plays this like elaborate football, but just gets beaten. He'll have incredible moments where you think, wow, this is the greatest, most beautiful football you've ever seen. But then he'll just crash to like, a big defeat. And everyone's like, oh, Diniz doesn't know what he's doing. But like, then it seems to be with Fluminense this time round, he's managed to get the system in such a way that he keeps a lot of that, those unusual, flamboyant, spontaneous aspects, but can actually compete. And they finished third in the Brasileiro last year, which is like above what was expected. And now, of course, they're in the final of the Copa Libertadores, and Fluminense have never won this tournament. This is the Champions League of South America, and they're in this match, the final match. If Diniz delivers this trophy, like, it's a huge, huge deal, and it's almost validation, right, for his crazy thinking. So yeah, it's been amazing to learn about it and study it, which I've been doing. And and also at the same time watching the team at times struggle, and at times it's difficult because in 2022 they were so beautiful to watch, but in 2023 it's been more difficult with changes of players and perhaps defenses getting wise to his system and you know, injuries and other aspects. But it's almost like they focused on the Copa Libertadores more than the league as a kind of all or nothing plan, and it's come off. They've like rolled the dice and they're in the final now. So while some of the performances haven't been as, I think, nice to watch as maybe they were in 2022, the Libertadores games have been incredibly exciting, incredibly thrilling, and with lots of nice play. So it's, you know, now they end up in a final against Boca Juniors at the Maracanã, which is like, I mean, this is crazy stuff. Which if they win, they could play Man City. There you go.
You'll be a busy man that week.
I mean, Diniz against Guardiola. I mean, listen, this is a game, Gary, right? That's a game. That's why we love football, for me. Yeah. Because, you know, you watch, again, I've not watched the game entirely, so I don't want to talk about it too much, but from what I understand, this Arsenal Man City game yesterday, it's kind of like that Spider-Man meme, you know, where they just be pointing at each other, you know? And it's like they cancel each other out, it's stagnant, and it's like, why football surely would be way more fun when you get these diverse ideas clashing together. And look, Man City would, of course, they're massive. It's like David v Goliath, right? Fluminense coming to play Man City, but just seeing these two styles go together would be amazing, I think.
Hello, coaches. You asked and we delivered. One of the most popular requests we get on this channel is pass and warm-ups, and it's not the regular slow way to be passing exercises. No, what coaches are looking for is the one-touch, intricate combination type exercises with that emphasis on quality, technique, and tempo. So we have decided to put 30 of these exercises together and release them on an ebook that you can get access to right away. If you're a youth coach who's looking for some extra technical work, or you're even a college coach or a club coach working with older players looking for some warm-up exercises or some pictures to align with your tactical objectives, we can help you out. Our new ebook, 30 passing practices, is available on the link below. It's a PowerPoint that includes video, session details, and coaching points on each slide. Tons of ideas, tons of different pictures, lots of adaptions. You can get it on the link below or at modernsoccercoach.com/shop. Thanks for the support and enjoy.
Yeah, the relationist, again, something that when I started looking at it, again, 2023, so you think of going from polarized view to the other, highly structured to zero structure, but there is structure. So can you talk about what the consistencies are and then where the differences are?
Yeah, and I think this is one of the big points that I probably maybe I haven't articulated that well in writing, because it seems to be an issue that people, there's misconceptions about, right? People think, oh yeah, Diniz, relationism, Jamie Hamilton, yeah, they're talking, no structure, free form, do what you want, players. And it's like, no way, man, I'm a coach. Like, you can't do that, right? It doesn't just, you don't just go do whatever you want. So the question is, what is the structure? How are you arranging, right? So from watching Diniz and various other coaches and learning about these ideas, one of the primary ideas is proximity of players. So we want to get players close together because that affords quick, spontaneous combinations. Because if they're too far apart, it's very difficult to do this kind of thing, 1-2s and give and goes and little flicks and tricks. Because if you're too far apart, I mean, it's just the distances make it almost impossible. So then, okay, bring them together. Of course, the big problem then is, and what people are so afraid of is, if too many of your players are close together, when you lose the ball, there's so much open space, and with the quality of counter-attacking that there is these days, you will just get destroyed, right, very, very quickly. And I suppose, and lots of coaches and analysts and contact me, and that's always the primary concern, and rightly so, right? Is this is all really cool, but we're going to get destroyed on the counter-attack, right? So, okay, so how do you mitigate against that? And it seems to me that someone like Diniz has developed this idea of playing on the side of the pitch. So they will gather, when they gather together, so they're still making a build-up. If we start at the base, they'll still be making a build-up. Diniz wants to make a build-up. Again, you don't have to make a short passing build-up in a relational system. You could play long, like Renato Gaucho at Grêmio, for example, would just not really bother with much of a ball exit. He would probably just go a bit longer and then start to play further up the pitch. Diniz likes a short ball exit, likes to control the ball all the way up the pitch. But he won't do it really in a structured way. He might give it to Andre or Ganso, one of the ball-playing midfielders, will come and just take the ball from the goalkeeper and just start to dribble slowly out. And then when players come to them, they start their passing moves. They tend to then move to the side if they're going to make one of their what I call tilt attacks or approximations, when the players get together. And they gather on the side, which has a few benefits, right? And one of the primary benefits is that if you lose the ball on the side of the pitch, the opponent who has won the ball has less options to launch their counter attack, right? They essentially, because they're against the sideline, so they essentially have 180 degrees instead of 360 degrees to launch their counter attack. So you're already half their counter attack options by doing it on the side. Then you also have 6, 7, sometimes 8 players in that proximity, which means you can counter pressing can come in. If your team is organized for counter pressing, you can do it against the side of the pitch and either foul them or tag them or stop them from doing this counter attack. And if what you actually have then is actually very safe possession, because you're on the side of the pitch, lots of players over, and if you have 8 guys over there or 7 guys, it's unusual for the opposition to bring that many over. So you're usually going to have an overload. So, and you can also go back to your defender or your goalkeeper to release the pressure a little bit. And what you end up having is fairly stable possession if you're cool in these situations. So that's what you'll see. And as the play progresses, you'll see, because they're close together, so many of them, 1-2s feature heavily. That's one mode of progression, or tabelas, as they call them in Brazil. Simple give and go. We all know them from five-a-side football from when we're kids. But the idea is based around them, right? That's how they're organizing. It's not you wait in the half space for me to find you. It's come towards me. We 1-2, we go. Like that, they're looking for these moments. If you look at Manchester City's 1-2 stats, not very high for how much possession they have. Interestingly, they make 1-2s. They have possession all the time, but not as many as other teams. Newcastle have more 1-2s than Manchester City. And then on top of that, you have other ideas such as escadinhas, or staircases in Portuguese, because if you're building on the side, you have to get to the middle to score. So what you find is these diagonal entries come from, if you're tilted on the left side, 7 guys playing on the left, they'll make a diagonal entry into the middle, sometimes with 3 in a line, sometimes more, and it's maybe a dummy from the central guy who steps over it, collects the return. Could be a little series of 1-2s along the diagonal line, like they're going up a ladder. And it's almost as if these structures just emerge at certain moments, and the players recognize it and go, bang, bang, there we go. So they're not forcing this moment to happen. They're playing, they're moving, they're approaching, and then when they align, you can go. And Malmo give a very good example of this kind of football in Europe. And their use of escadinhas has been very interesting because they've worked a lot for them. They've scored some beautiful goals from these repeated patterns of players aligning in this structure. This is what I mean by emergent structure rather than put down formational structure. And the players recognizing it and going, shit, we can go. And so all these kind of things are in play. And I suppose just one thing I would also say is that I'm not saying that 1-2s or escadinhas don't happen in the positional football. Of course they can, and like vice versa, they happen across football. But it's to do with the how much are these things the locus of organization, right? How much are these things the aspects that are organizing the players? And in relational football, tabelas, escadinhas, tilting are the structures of what the players are basing their interactions on. So yeah, there's a lot there, and we could go on. Of course, the article "What is Relationism" goes into these. Maybe we can link it. Goes into this. A few more tactical concepts that I've talked about, and I don't say I don't claim to have them all or have all the answers to them. But in terms of describing them, there's a few there for sure.
Yeah, those principles are really interesting because again, the principles, it's a great word we all love now, right? Coaching community principles, it's taken over philosophy almost. But
yes.
And what I think it does is, because coaches want to be detailed and want to be seen as being diligent, is they'll have more principles, and the more you have, then the less you probably prioritize. But that's basically, like, to me, that's what principles are. It's a prioritization of what you value in certain structures. When you use that staircase and the 2v2, the give and go, when those emerge as principles, then I wonder, does that draw out then more of players being a bit more, hey, we've got to try this here.
Yeah, and I think it's to do with, I always think of, in terms of what you're attuning the player's attention to, right, from a coaching perspective. So if you take like a possession game, right, if you play 4v4 plus 3 or 5v5 plus 4, whatever, your end, get your two guys on the end, maybe you have a free guy in the middle. And, you can play that positionally. You can tell the guys, make the structure, keep the structure, fill the corners, have the guy in the middle and circulate the ball, use your 7v4 advantage, whatever, right? And then you're attuning the player's attention to this overriding structure. Guys, structure, possession structure, shape. That's how you're coaching it. Saying these words to try and trigger the player's attention, right? Are you in the right place? Where should you be standing? I know, among other things, but you could flip that and just not do that and say, look for 1-2s, right? You could award 1-2s for the exercise. That's how you score. So they try to 1-2 around guys to make progressions. You can award other, various other things. You can say give and go, always move, always try to make a new line when you receive the ball. So it's, and some people have criticized my proposal that there is two things, right? A positionism and a relationism. But speaking from like a practical coaching perspective, when I'm coaching, I can care about the shape or I can not, or I can go in between. I can care a little bit about it, care not so much about it on the spec. But when I'm coaching positional football, that is radically different to coaching a relational style. If I'm doing it like on each end of the spectrum, because what I'm asking the players to pay attention to is completely different, and what I'm drawing their attention to. And I think that when you draw their attention to these aspects like 1-2s, escadillas, it is allowing them more what you say, authority, autonomy in how deciding how the ball is going to progress, because it's up to them. Like, you have to combine to do it. It's not that the system has worked it out for you and you have to execute the plan of the system. This is the thing. This is why I talked about with the machine being an abstract thing, right? It's like that the system and these positional ideas has worked the game out, right? And the coach has designed it. We've got the plan. We've solved it. Now, you boys or girls or whoever, execute the actions, okay? And of course, even in the most strict positional play, the player decides, of course, when they receive, is there pressure? Who do I play to? But the decisions there, the options they have are quite limited because of what the system allows. Good systems have variations, right? If they come, play long, if that, then that. If it's like an algorithm, right? It's like a flow chart that the coaches code the players with, right? And I'm not saying it's wrong, but it's different from the other option, which is saying the system, I don't have the pre-planned solution. You are the players. You solve the problem. So my job as the coach is to make an environment where you can solve the problem, not to solve the problem for you. So again, that may be one way to think about the difference.
Yeah, this is fascinating, because I think this has been brewing for a number of years, where coaching community, obviously everyone wants to be Pep and everyone wants to play the Pep football. But Pep is high control. Like I sent you the question of Henry chatting about, he took him off at halftime for others. It's well known that but you get a reputation as a controlling coach. So it's this, because today leadership styles are more flexibility. Every coach will say, like, we've got a bit of both, Jamie. We do a bit of both. I do have a bit of relationism, but they don't, because we're not great at gauging our own teams for the most part.
Yeah, I suppose, again, interpretation of what these words actually mean is important. So hopefully this podcast, this discussion is going to be helpful, because relationism isn't just letting people do what they want. It is organizing the team, but it's more to do with self-organizing. It's more for creating the environment where self-organization can happen. But that's not doing anything. That is creating the environment. So the question is, how are you creating it? It's about constraints, right? And what constraints are you applying to create this environment? I also think that there's nothing wrong with someone who wants to have more ordered football and more controlled football, because everyone's different. And some people prefer more ordered ways of life. And that's true in football and work and play and across, people's lifestyles. And that's fine. No problem. So I think that if you are a more ordered, control-based coach, there will be more ordered, control-oriented players that are going to be really suited to your environment. But I think that hopefully one of the things that can come from these discussions is that there are players who are not like that. And when you put a player who is not from this way of thinking, this orientation, this mode of football, which can often happen when, say, a South American player comes to Europe. And they think of Ganso going to São Paulo's Seville, right? And it's like, you have this player who's, interpreting the moment, playing in a more, in a freer way, right? Even though it's not complete freedom, in this a bit more decisional autonomy, however you want to frame it. And suddenly they get put in a system where it's very regimented, detailed, instructed, how you have to act in different moments of the game. Then that's going to be disorientating for the player, and it's strange, and then they look bad, right? And then people in Europe will say, "Oh yeah, he's lazy, or he lacks intensity, or he's no positional awareness," and all these kinds of things. And the player kind of gets branded as like lacking, the ability. But then they're incredible players. Like they could go to another club, and it's like, oh my god, like they're unbelievable. So like maybe it's a useful tool for recruitment, right? As well, to think, well, if we're going to sign a player, does this player's profile fit the profile of the coach and of the club? So it might be dangerous to sign a more relational player in a positional system. Not that you can't do that, but it's something that might be worth thinking about,
Yeah, it goes the other way as well, where Steve Bruce on Simon Jordan's podcast, and he talked about a journalist that kind of went after him in Newcastle. He put a player on the bench, or he put a player on the pitch from the bench, and the journalist said that he told him to play wherever he wanted. Bruce just looks at Jordan and goes, as if, and they're like, as if we'd ever let that happen, that we give someone that freedom. And I just thought, I was doing a bit of research for this, and I came across that and thought, God, the way we look at that as coaches, amazing.
Yeah. And again, when you watch Deniz's Fluminense, like, it's not that the players run everywhere, like all the time. They have striker, they have defender, they have the midfield, but it's it's not uncommon to see the right winger appear on the left side next to the left winger, right? And you talked about the Guardiola Henry example, where Henry was subbed off for crossing the pitch because he was on the left. He wanted to go play with 1-2s with Messi on the right, and he got subbed off for it. So in the relational football, this can be allowed. It's not a breaking of the rules for this to happen. It might be advised against at certain moments, that you can still have an opinion of, was it the right moment to do it, this kind of thing. But there isn't such these strict locations and spaces that the players have to be occupying. This rational occupation of space that's often talked about in positional play, and it starts to then, because it begs the question: how much do you need positions in football? Really, do you need to set you're probably always going to have guys who are better at scoring and guys who are better at keeping it out, like, and faster guys on the side or whatever, and guys who can play 360. But how much do you need formations in the sense that we understand them, in these numerical notations, right? These numbers, these 4-4-2, 4-3-3. Because why do we need them? Maybe we don't. Because when you watch a game of football, it's difficult to tell. I started with Diniz, it's difficult to tell exactly what formation they're playing because they're moving around so much. So they end up imposing these simplified versions of football onto teams. And perhaps that holds us back in many ways. And we need to move away from organizing football teams and using this numerical notation because it's too limiting. But, time will tell. But I think it makes sense to move towards a more fluid, adaptive systems rather than strict, rigid ones.
Jamie, we need it because we need to keep analysts in jobs. So don't be doing anything that might disrupt that. The piece of the automations that you talked about, and then obviously, as always the case with coaches at youth level that listen to this, that say, all right, well, I'd love to play like Pep, but I don't have the players. I'd love to play like De Zerbi, but I don't have the players. It's okay for Diniz. He's got the players. How does he, do you think, from a strategic viewpoint, not make this disjointed, where players have freedom, where they're not on top of each other or it breaks down constantly?
Yeah, and I guess that again comes back to the players understanding the principles of organization, because there are principles of organization. It isn't just do whatever you want. It's saying, okay, if there's a tilt on the left-hand side with 7 guys, they'll use what's called a defensive diagonal on the other. It's like the opposite fullback will just come and close the space. It's almost like rest defense we think of now as like a 3-2, like the army waiting, the guys, the regiment guards standing in their formation. That's not a natural way for people to stand. That's coached, right? The coach says stand 3-2, rest defense. But in this version, the rest defense is just a guy comes in on the other side and closes the space. But that's his role. There's a role there. There's an organization to this. And again, like the diagonal structures, maybe we can link. I've got some pictures of how Malmo were organizing what I would call a relational structure. And you've got these roles: the players in the tilt, the guys forming the diagonal, the guys doing the rest defense. If it's man-oriented rest defense, just the centre backs on the striker, and the other fullback coming in on the defensive diagonal. So the players have to be aware of these. I mean, there are also organizational principles in the way that positional play has them, but they're different. They're not based on the top-down imposition of a set arrangement and structure. They're based on different appreciations, right? So, how do the players attune themselves and cohere? By understanding the same principle as positional play, by understanding the ideas in a collective way. They're just different organizational ideas. If you think Guardiola's actually, he talked about a flock of geese, right? When they fly in like a V, right? They fly in a formation. If you see starlings, a murmuration of starlings, they flock, right, in a different way. They're both coherent. They're both organized. They're both collective appreciations of how to move, but they're completely different. That's based on staying in formation, everyone moving together. Maybe they could switch, but keep the V. So the V is always there. The bird or school of fish, they don't have anything set, but they're moving together. So it's like, well, how are they doing that? Interesting. Maybe a football team will move more towards that kind of movement than set formations.
Yes. So again, culture, society, coach in 2023, the bravado on the sideline, the show, the game alongside the game. Sometimes you referenced or you quoted Diniz to being a gardener. So what type of coach behavior are you observing on the sideline for this?
I mean, and again, I don't advocate Fernando Diniz as some kind of like savior of football or something like that, or even as unnecessarily as a role model for people. I really don't, because Diniz is he's an extreme guy, and he's made coaching actions that I think seem fairly harsh. There's a famous incident where he shouts at a player really, really harshly, and it's during COVID, so you can hear hear what he says. And I'm not saying that people need to be like Fernando Diniz, but so in terms of like coaching behaviors, in terms of being a gardener, what I'm referring to there more is this attending to the environment, of creating this environment where the problem solving can happen. So practical example would be the tilt, right? The tilt is the environment. So as a coach, you see Diniz, for example, if the ball's on the side with the left back, say on the left side near the touchline, and Diniz is standing there also, and there's not enough players close, you'll see him waving guys on, come, right? But once they're over, he's like, okay, now we've got the environment. You do it. You play now. Create. You're the footballers. You're good. You play for Fluminense Football Club. Some of your internationals played, and you know what it's like. Like, these guys are good. Right? You don't play for these clubs. Imagine playing against five-a-side against these guys. I mean, you'd be you have no idea how good these guys are. So, allow them to do that. Allow them to find that. And again, Ganso talks about it being like a street game from when he was a kid. And it's like, allow them to play like that in those formative years when they became when they learned how to play, because they don't learn how to play because of me, right? In the academy, when you come and coach, you learn to play with your friends in the playground or on the street, wherever you play. That's where you learn to play football, and you get your touch, and that's where you become good, and that's where people notice you. So can you facilitate that kind of environment and allow them to play like that? So coach behaviors would be very strict on making sure that there is that environment. For example, if they're too far away, you might get angry. So what are you doing? You're not. How are you going to play if you're too far away? So come on. But once they're in, okay, then maybe it's more hands off and say, okay, we look for Tibet, and now it's up to you to do it. In terms of coaching behavior, yeah, Diniz can lose his shit sometimes. You know what I mean? But it's like, I'm not saying it's good or bad. It just is. Everyone's different. So yeah, it's being strict on ensuring the environment's correct.
One of the things that I think and last few questions here, I won't keep you too long. One of the things that I picked up on and reading and then listening has been like you're trying to challenge coaches to to kind of see beyond one form of something. And then I link that back, and when I'm preparing the questions, I'm linking it back to, all right, well, how do we almost like teach this to a group of people? Coaches today in coach education, definitely in the US, are starting with philosophy. And I actually think we should challenge that a little bit, because the philosophy, if you have a broad experience and a broad definition of what football is, your philosophy will always bring you towards the Nou Camp or the Etihad. And then all of a sudden, then you're building that there of a framework. It sounds like you would like us, or like football coaches, almost to have a broader spectrum of how they're defining the game, good and bad. How would you do that as a coach in education?
Coach education is a very interesting concept itself, and I've been through UEFA licenses and these kinds of things, and obviously I'm aware of all the content that's out there. I'm not aware of all of it. I'm aware of how much there is, and there's a lot. And it's like, I don't want coach. I mean, I don't want Jamie Hamilton. I don't want coaches to do anything they don't want to do. But it's like, all I'm saying is that from my perspective, and I think in terms of generating an environment where football can be innovative and creative, I think it needs to have diversity, because I think that when you get too caught up into one way of thinking, into one paradigm, if you want to call it that, because there's nothing challenging, there's no disruption, there's no bumping into each other, right? There's no movement or friction. Things become fossilized, things get frozen in time, and they become stagnant. And I believe that that's what is happening in football, is that there is a stagnation of ideas. And I think by looking to alternative ways, we can then cause that friction. And that's why I think it's okay to have arguments about this. And it's okay to have a little bit heated discussions sometimes, right? Because that's good. Like, because if you're talking an art, music criticism or food criticism, you're going to have people who are arguing about things all the time. No, that's such a better album than that. That's a better movie than that. A better director, better actor. But these conversations, I believe, are good and generative, because they cause friction, and it's from that, and they cause imbalance, they cause movement, and from that, novelty arises, because new things happen. Like if you're cooking, you put different ingredients together and new flavors happen. If you're just cooking with the same shit all the time, nothing new happens. So, and I think Juan Malillo was alluding to this, although not in these words and these terms, when he wrote this article for The Athletic about the World Cup, when he talked about the homogenization of football and the globalizing method that is now prevalent. And he said it's difficult to tell the difference between Brazil and Cameroon. You wouldn't know who was who now, whereas before you would see different styles of play. And this is the issue. Homogenization of a particular way of thinking about football, fueled by, and I would say it's European systems, positional systems play, because the resources of Europe and European football outstrip others, and have far outstripped others throughout football's history, especially over recent TV times, and all the money's gone into it. So of course those systems are going to be buttressed, right? They're going to have this backing. But what if the geopolitical history was different and the money was in Brazil and stayed there? And that league was the most famous in the world. And that style of play was actually the one that all the most money and the best players were playing in, right? Then football would actually be different. So I think it's important to try and take into these, because some people would say, oh, Jamie, yeah, but positional play is just superior. It's progress, you know? It's just a better way of playing football. And I actually don't agree with that. I would challenge that. And I say that I think it's one way and it can be the best, absolutely. But I think it's going to be interesting to see how well that argument stands up, that it is the best way to play as we develop, because already we're seeing fluidity and teams mixing ideas. So I think that adopting a more fluid relational style can have huge benefits if the resources are there, if the environment's correct. And I don't see any reason why, again, with comparable resources, a more relational team can win things. And they do win things. Argentina win the World Cup. They don't play positional football. And Real Madrid win the European Cup like 3 times. Like, it's not luck. Okay, they have good players. But now we're seeing other teams start to adopt these methods, and you know, it's exciting. So yeah, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think that diversity piece is so important, especially in 2023, where because of, so I understand why critical thinking has been reduced, but also the commercialization of football, and then the incentivization of winning or developing player X. And now, because we're now hiring 50 people in the club to do it, now you have to get 50 people, you have to justify 50 people's employment to do that there. So you have to all agree on something. And
yeah, and this is the whole system, guys. This is the thing, because if one style is prevalent and dominant and everyone believes that that's the way to play football, then what's going to happen to development? You're going to be focused on developing players for those systems, right? The players that are suited to that football. And that's what we see. We see in the academies. We see these it's okay, what they want to play top level football. What does top level football look like? It looks like that. Positional play, generally speaking. Although there's variation. I'm not trying to say it's only that, but it's weighted towards that. So then, of course, it's in the interest of academies to produce players that can play in these systems. But, what if it wasn't like that? What if it was, because and what ends up happening anyway is that these teams want to sign kids from South America because they're actually different.
Yes,
right?
yes.
So it's like, well, how did they get good? How did they get different? Like if you're training in completely different ways from what you're training, right? It kind of doesn't make sense. And it's like, it's weird. So I do think that football can look different, and I think it can be more in possession based. It can be based on a more creative in possession ideas than safety and control with the ball and certainty and reducing uncertainty, and then counteracting that with your out of possession system. It becomes like chess. It becomes like this coach centered game. I think football can be more top level football can be more based on creative in possession ideas. And as a fan of many different kinds of of music, of film, of art, of books, I like that because it's imaginative, it's got creativity, it's spontaneous. And I have to say, sure, I'm pretty confident that a lot of football fans would like that too. And not to say everyone can have their own way to enjoy things. But for me, to see spontaneity, surprise, unpredictability, chaos, incredible things unfolding in front of your eyes that you didn't think could happen. That for me is what makes football so compelling, and they call it the beautiful game, right? For that reason.
I would go one step further. I wonder if players are going to move to wanting more of that, because again, this mass production, the factory, the machine is starting them at. I remember the impact Mourinho had in 04, 03, 04, 05 to the coaching community, more organization, different way of training. And then I remember coaching kids that have never been coached and then moving them into that type of training. And they were like, this is amazing. Whoa, brilliant. And you felt like you were making a difference. Well, now I think more kids get it earlier. So now they're coming to you where they've had 10 years of it. And they're so disengaged a lot of the time by monotony of do this, do that.
You said it yourself from the factory, but I mean, it's maybe you work in McDonald's all your life, you think, shit, I want to make actual burgers. You know what I mean? It's I want to make nice burgers. Okay, McDonald's, okay, we all like a McDonald's now and again, but some artisan burgers. You know what I mean? It's yes, there's that's nice to make because it's yourself. You can put your own stamp on it. It's not a burger that is made according to the protocols, right, of this huge corporation, right? With the time, you have to fry them for that many seconds, then you have to flip it for that many seconds. It's everything's time, motion studied in these places. So yeah, if you're a player, okay, I don't speak for all players, of course, but surely there are a number of players that just don't want that and think, no, I can play. I want a little bit more, freedom to express myself. And, that's clear. A lot of players already speak about these things. The big question always is, can it be, can it be successful at the highest level? Diniz might get to play against Guardiola, Fluminense against City, if they win the Libertadores. I mean, Fluminense, it's like David v. Goliath, right? I mean, to go up against that system of Guardiola with the petrodollar state-backed positional system, right? And you've got this gang from Brazil and these old guys. He's got 40 years old Felipe Melo's in there, Ganso's in there. I mean, this kind of motley crew playing a spectacular football. And what a match that would be! Even if City, won 8-0, I wouldn't care. But it would just be a fantastic thing to see this clash of styles.
Brilliant. last one for you, and it's kind of similar to the coach education, but let's say it's a development model, and let's just say you'll hit this, but let's just say you got a Diniz franchise, and or here's a better one actually. I bought a club and I've hired you to oversee our youth development processes to eventually play more of a style for that there. Looking at U14, U12, U10, is there anything they can do?
Well, certainly I wouldn't be in favor of any kind of Diniz franchise or something like that. Sorry, guys, I'm out. Right? I think I'm out of that. But okay, the question, how might we be influenced by this style and try and implement it in places? That's interesting, right? And that's something I've written about as well. And I'm always hyper aware in this situation of falling into the trap that I'm actually of the thing I'm actually criticizing, because I'm criticizing essentially this kind of top-down copycat, follow from the playbook type thinking. So if I'm saying, oh, look, here's a guy called Fernando Diniz, he plays football like this, now all you have to do is study him and then implement that, then that's exactly the problem, isn't it? So like what we then have to look at is, okay, what is Diniz doing? Diniz is, in his view anyway, and he's spoken about this, and in many others' view, is actually trying to express something uniquely Brazilian, right, about the football, about something that he feels passionate about and that his players are connected to and all this kind of thing. So I'd probably, where I would start is, where am I? What is this club? What is this country? What is this culture? What is the history of this place? What are the resources we have? And what is there a way to try to express some of these things in a football manner? And that might be positional play. If you're from a Cruyffian, whatever school that's had their history in positional game, then why maybe you don't want to change that and you want to keep your tradition of this. Total football was a masterpiece of football. It's nothing bad that it has to go, but it's a consideration that just because it was good in Holland or Spain doesn't mean it's good everywhere. No. So we need to look at ourselves, where we are, who we are, and think, how can we express ourselves in something that is like an authentic way, or at least to try to attempt to. Not easy. But I think that, I certainly don't claim to have like these answers that you can sign up and I give to you, because I don't. But what I think is interesting is to try and propose these things that can actually get us thinking in a slightly different way about the football that we're involved in.
Fantastic. No, this has been amazing, Jamie. Thank you so much. I just said before, and we'll put your blogs below, the link to get people there. But you're doing more writing these days. It's coming up on my feed all the time.
Yeah, I'm still writing. I'm working on a piece on Ganso at the moment, the Brazilian playmaker who I'm fascinated by, one of my favorite players for many reasons. Hopefully I'll get that out in time for the Copa Libertadores final, which is the 4th of November, I think. And there's a few other things coming up around that as well. I'm planning to present my content in a slightly different way as well, which could be interesting, which hopefully will be interesting. So that's going to be happening. But I'm still going down the rabbit hole, let's say.
Brilliant. I love it. Your writing is amazing. Keep doing it, and we appreciate all you're doing and challenging ideas. Keep us posted of the other stuff, and if we can help in any way, just let me know.
No, it's really great, Garen, and thanks so much for the invitation. It's really nice to get the chance to speak to you again, and hopefully it's of interest to people. And if people want to get in touch and talk about these kind of things, then that's also cool. The more conversation, the better. The more different opinions, the better. Even if you think I'm talking absolute shit, or talking it's all good, thanks for the opportunity to speak. It's a real pleasure.
Top class. Thank you, Jamie.
All right, cheers, Garen.